Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mark Forgie.
Anyway, Brian, thank you very much, and thanks members for your invitation to speak to you this evening. This is really a talk about the attitude and the reasons of people making the choice between burial and cremation. But having the experience of done exhumations and cremations, I almost refer to cremation as accelerated burial, because the result is the same in the end. In the cremation chamber, when the process is finished, the bones are lying on the base. Just as if you have to do exhumation, you open the grave, the bones are lying in that position where they've been. So they seem two different processes, but let's face it, I think the end point is almost exactly the same. So, that's as technical as I'm going to get with the actual process. I'm going to talk about the attitude and the timings. Cremation in Australia has really followed the UK model. Now, we're a colony of UK. We're almost a county of the UK. Back in the first part of the 1900s, and in the UK, cremation has always been treated as an alternative to burial. There's the funeral and the disposition as burial or cremation. But in the US, it was categorised, cremation's been categorised as an alternative to the funeral. And they got themselves into a bit of a bind over there, because they virtually ended up with, if you didn't bury someone, you were a very bad person, and you weren't treating them properly. This was largely the propaganda of the people who made the big metal caskets. You've probably seen them on popular television and what have you. And also over there, it's a very popular thing for people to have crypts or vaults buried in the ground, so the coffin goes into a container, like a concrete type container in the ground. So the whole ethos was really skewed. I think it was really not serving people, they were actually serving themselves. So that's where we're stuck with the UK model in Australia. We haven't really gone on to the US model, thank goodness for that. Excuse me. Interestingly, the first evidence of cremation was discovered at Lake Mungo. Now, some of you may know where that is. It's up near, I see Maggie nodding her head there, she knows where that is. It's near Mildura. It's an old Aboriginal site of habitation. And a container of cremated remains was discovered in the 1950s. It was about 20,000 years ago that they estimated the cremation took place, and that's the earliest really in the world that they've found this happen. And we all know of the Hindu rite of cremation, and in Asia, you know, the banks of the river Ganges and floating the ashes down the river, you know, very common. But let's just drift over towards Europe, because that's where we're really heading towards before we get back to Australia. The rite of disposal 2,000 years ago in Greece was cremation. Now, you can't imagine too many Greek people having a cremation now, especially with the Orthodox Church. But and also the Vikings, you remember the Viking funerals, boats burning. But the advent of Christianity saw the end of cremation as a form of sanitary disposal of human remains. And cremation, or any form of burning of the body, was virtually a sacrilege in the Christian times. Of course, anybody who was a heretic or perceived heretic ended up being burnt. And also, the worst thing you do was somebody died and they were deemed to be a heretic later on, they were dug up and their remains were burnt. So it was really a real rite of punishment. And and this really remained the custom for all of Christian and Muslim Europe, because we've got to remember that Muslim Europe extended up into southern regions of France, early in the last 2,000 years. And this was the way, and in the mid to late 1800s, cremation societies began to make their mark and advocate what they called a better and more hygienic way. And this promotion of cremation was much greater in the UK, where cremation societies were flourished, where the church was basically the Protestant church rather than the Roman Catholic Church. Now, if we just show a little cartoon here, number 1, and there we have the poor person waiting to pass on, the devil waiting up here, and we've got people advocating the cremation society and the burial society to. You'll be able to see this on the website, because I've given Brian a copy of this talk, and it has all the pictures, all the photographs and things in it. Oh goodness, we've done well here. Well, the undertaker with these coffins, and the cremation societies with the burning. So I think you've done well there. I don't have to. So that was really how it was viewed way back then. Also, we've all heard of Burke and Hare, the notorious grave robbers. Now, they were a pretty nasty couple, because for anatomy, they were fresh corpses were required, but also they used to kill to order as well if they couldn't find any ones that recently deceased. So what families tended to do was keep mum, dad or whoever in the front parlour until a good state of decomposition set in, which negated any use for anatomical purposes, because things weren't as well as they could have been. And this drove things, well, if we cremate something, a bit of anatomy can't be performed too well, so that pushed things along. Cremation in Australia, there's one or two of, how can I say it, Chinese, Indian, like foreign people, not English people, were cremated. And probably the first one that took place was, they were in Melbourne. And we'll just go to the next slide. And there's such sanitary advantages. So that's from the State Library of Victoria. This is on Sandringham Beach for Elizabeth Henniker. And there we are. They were a nice pile of wood here on the beach, and they even said what hymns were sung. And if you come to this corner here, this person there. And what they did in this drawing, they sort of made it a bit like a day out of a little child here watching proceedings. So it was a bit like a real form of voyeurism, or honestly, it was people were very much intrigued by this process, and it really didn't do a lot to enhance the status of cremation as a form of the end of life, because got Brighton Beach, pile of wood. It was just the dignity level wasn't there. So I think you would have had to be in a fairly convicted, how can I say, a person of high convictions to persist with this form. There was no clergyman, and the undertaker and his assistants retired to the distance during the proceedings. So they were they were very careful in what they did. And it was really up to South Australia to lead the way. And again, it wasn't until 1900 and a donation of £1,000 from the Bar Smiths began the construction of a crematorium at the West Terrace Cemetery. And the first cremation in a crematorium in the Southern Hemisphere took place at West Terrace on the 30th of May 1903. So, and if we just go to the next one, that was another backyard one here, and the next one. That was that was in 1902, and it just showed the West Terrace crematorium, the foundation stone, and everybody there in their boaters and Sunday best. All the members of Parliament were there, sort of soaking up, as they do these days, soaking up the adulation of the crowds. But and if we go to the next slide, they modelled this new crematorium on the London crematorium at Golders Green. The chimney was in this pseudo bell tower. This picture here is in the chapel effect, where the coffin was placed on here, and then they had a mechanism which dragged it in through here into the working area of the crematorium, and up here, of course, is the original furnace. These things, so this was the first crematorium in the Southern Hemisphere. It was at West Terrace. But I read a book the other day, and the chapter was entitled "The First and the Worst." So that was so even though it was the first, can't rest on our laurels there. And it was a disaster. And if we go to the next slide, I've got the from 1903 to 1947. The actual numbers of cremations that took place. This is the only place in South Australia, so every cremation is numbered is here. So 3, 2, 1, 4, 6, 9, 1947, 208. Now we're looking at less than 3% of the burials, of the deaths in the upper cremation here. Now there had to be a reason for this, because about this time, about here, in 08-09, they built very grand premises, crematoriums in the other states, and they went straight to like 30% of all deaths ended up in cremation as the form of disposition, whereas South Australia is bouncing along here at 3. And just go to the next slide, please. And I found this in my grandfather's, one of his books. This is a cutout in a book, and this 1930. It starts off here: crematorium, is the cost justified? Government to consider. And this is 1930. The Public Works, if you just go through it, just peasant furnace was obsolete, but not replaced. Wouldn't last for more than 2 years. The cost was more than the income. Wooden coke furnace. Fees in Adelaide. Now this is quite interesting. It's very much the same as it is today. Fees in Adelaide are £5 on a weekday and £6 on a Saturday and £7 on a Sunday. The corresponding charges in Melbourne are and this is very much the funeral, the funeral costs today. They're double what they are here. 10, 11, the guineas in Victoria, because they're much more sophisticated over there. You see, 10, 11, 12 guineas, you see. 386 cremations in 27 years. So it really wasn't working. People, the reason, obviously, interstate people were choosing, but they weren't choosing it here. I think it was purely due to the facility, and people weren't going to. They wanted a dignified funeral. They didn't want to go to something that the equipment was poor, and they could only have 2 cremations a day if it was working well. And it smoked. It was talk about you can have smoke from cremations, but this was like you couldn't see inside the operation chamber. You just could not see. And the catafalque where the coffin was placed, I just showed you the other picture, that was almost sound like a grinding machine as the coffin was pushed along. It must have been just horrendous. And bits fell off the building. So you walked in there, luckily bricks weren't falling off the roof. So it was really, and as I said, after 2 or 3 years after, they went straight to 30% of cremations per death, whereas South Australia was in 1947 was only 3.5%. So South Australia wasn't going back because people didn't want to do it. Just the facilities just weren't up to scratch. And the public wanted cremation, and the government would not repair or even fix anything up because of that. The reason they were not sure, they wouldn't spend any money on it. And it was up to, sounds like today here, it was up to private enterprise to come to the party. Now they were smart enough there were 2 parties I'll go to in a minute, they were smart enough to realise that what was happening interstate was going to happen here if things were done correctly. And there were 2 bodies. There was the Evergreen Memorial Park. I don't know if anybody's old to remember the scandals around that when they were door-to-door selling cemetery plots. That was established in 1947. And the other one was the Unley Mitcham Council conglomerate, which established Centennial Park in 1939. And they were vying for a licence. And the reason Centennial Park was successful is they had the dough. Enfield didn't have the money, but the reluctance of the government of the day to grant them a licence to build a new premises, which they're building there. That's the open foundation stone there. I can't work out why. It was just the politics were just phenomenal. And it was on the 12th of December 1955, the first cremation was carried out at Centennial Park. Yeah. And in 2 years, they had performed as many cremations that had been done at West Terrace in the preceding 50. Mm. So that just showed, you just got to do things properly. You can't not do them properly, and get people to come. And so the South Australians were no different to their interstate colleagues and will not be held to ransom with inferior facilities. West Terrace was closed shortly afterwards, and it was sort of put into mothballs in case they needed it. But in 1969 it was demolished as an unsafe building. Well, if the bricks were falling off before, you imagine what it was like when it's been left for a few years. And the cremator, which you saw a picture of then, the metal bits all ended up at the Wingfield dump. So that was the end of that. But it was the first one in excuse me, I'm coughing in. And And the popularity of cremation was getting more and more, especially in the city. And the chapels were, or the chapel, which the Norman chapel was overbooked, and they commissioned and built the second chapel in 1965. And this was the time when the crematorium was treated very much like the graveside. It was like everybody had to go to the actual crematorium, and it was the custom. Like we used to have cortages from Gawler all the way to Adelaide. It was probably a bit easier then with the traffic, and people felt that compulsion. There was either a church service and then a committal service at the crematorium. And if we just go on to the next picture, I'll just show you Centennial Park, which you may remember, that's no longer there. And the next one. Right, now this one is people trying to work out how to have a cremation at the point of committal with the minister and everything together. Because here we have the minister and the people lowering the coffin. So if we lower the coffin down, so if we go deeper down, and further. So here's the man in the basement. There's the cremation chamber, and he's holding the top of the. This is, I don't know how well this would have worked in practice. There's the lid of the cremation chamber, lowering the coffin straight into the cremation chamber, and then close the lid and then start this cremation process. There was a degree of obsession with having to be there, because what the crematorium didn't tell people was that they were cremating on their terms. As far as you go all the way to the crematorium, have your committal service, and then things would be put in storage till they had everything sorted out as far as their cremation time. So it's not like you put the coffin in the grave. The actual cremation did not take place until their processes were ready. So people did not know that. They were not told that. So, but anyway, that's just some interesting structure there of people trying to mimic the grave site with the crematorium. Now, during this time, there were large developments north of Adelaide, Elizabeth, and Enfield was granted a licence and started cremating on December 69, and by the 1st of December 1970, which was 12 months later, they'd done 500 cremations there on their own. So it just shows people were voting with their feet. And also because with our English population in the northern suburbs of Elizabeth and what have you, they were well used to it in the UK, so there was I hesitate the word to use popularity, the choice was much higher. And this really brings us to Gawler, and I've looked through our books, and before December 69, which corresponds to the opening of the Enfield facility, we'd only have 1 or 2 cremation services per year. And that was, we all remember back that nobody travelled anywhere in the old days. You know, you wouldn't go to Adelaide unless you had your tie and had your suit on and those sorts of things. You just didn't do it. So it wasn't until Enfield opened that cremation started to be a chosen course of action. And in 69, there were over 1,000 cremation services yearly in South Australia. Excuse me, Helen. Hope I don't damage your equipment. The Gawler Council were then obviously lobbied to build a memorial wall, which is still at the Williston Cemetery, and to accommodate cremated remains, because at that time, I don't know, we're creatures of habit or creatures of feeling what we should do, that all cremated remains had to be placed in a niche wall. And anybody familiar with a niche wall, the little post boxes things? And to do this niche wall, it took a long time. And I remember my father had a big cupboard full of stored ashes waiting for the thing to come to pass. And I think he also had my grandparents in there waiting to go on the wall as well. So we're all part. It just shows we're all part of the same cycle. And that really brings me to another practice, which, if we just come onto the cremated remain containers, there we are. That's a small one, is it? Oh, there we are, look at that. These have all got texture numbers on them. We've marked these, and we haven't thrown any cremated remains, not thrown them out, that's a bad word, we haven't dispersed them in a cemetery or done anything with them, and they're still there, because it's only this week somebody rang up and said, I'm looking for the cremated remains of so-and-so, and they said, well, we've got them here. Enfield had no record of them, and Enfield had done the cremation. We had the cremation, and this guy was so rapt that we'd had them there. So we're within our rights to disperse them properly, but it's just not, I feel it's not, well, I wouldn't like the responsibility. That's cremation number 130 out of from Enfield, and the name's all on there. And that's like a biscuit tin. And this is just a round metal tin, and that's a couple of years previous, 1968, from Centennial Park. That's how. And the next slide. Because with all these new walls, they made them all up for this little brick-size container. So they're all over the state. There's the standard size wall for that brick size. It's just a bit bigger than a normal house brick. But what they didn't tell everybody is that you weren't getting all the remains, which was a bit naughty, and that wasn't rectified until 1986, 85, 86. And if you go to the next slide, I'll show you. There's the one that goes in the wall. Then that's the one we use today, which will take all the remains. That's about 4 litres. And this is the one they brought out. It had a plastic bag inside. And we got this letter, and this was before we had a crematorium or anything. The letter said something like, due to improved technology, we can now recover more cremated remains. What a load of garbage. I mean, it was the same machinery, the same everything else. I mean, they wrote us a letter. I just can't believe the stupidity of people who would write such a thing, because it's just so clearly incorrect. So you can be assured today that they all come in that, and they're all there, because nobody wants. But what we do have to do sometimes to fit in the old wall is to either we've got to get them into there through a reprocessing, which we can't often do. And we have to tell the family then that we can put them in a small little bag behind, or they can disperse them elsewhere. Everybody knows they get the lot, you know. If they want us to disperse them, well, that's fine, but there's no sleight of hand going on here anymore. It was just crazy. I mean, I don't know how they got away with it. Well, just to sit back to 1988, we had the chapel, we had the catafalque, we had the crematorium chapel there. We had everything except the cremation machine or the crematorium, and I really had no intention of getting one until dealing with Enfield was a bit like dealing with your local council. They were so arrogant that they would, well, the example was, so we do the service in the chapel, bring the casket down to the crematorium chamber in the closed vehicle, straight to the cremator, and they had a special loading bay. Now the chief, the general manager, he was having his having his office renovated. So, because he didn't have to walk too far, he parked his car right in front of the doorway where we unloaded the coffins. And when I asked him to move it, he said, "What's your problem?" And I was not best pleased. And so I went down to the government printers, got hold of the Cremation Act, and the first line read, "Any person may own or operate a crematorium." And we started from there. So it was just sometimes things in life, doesn't matter how much power you think you've got no power if somebody somebody really thinks about it. So it's a matter of being polite to everyone and giving everyone good service. So so we applied for that, and we got our approval in. And our first cremation was in November 1989, and since that time we've done 45,000 cremations in Gawler.
45,000.
So it's really, we do a lot of cremations for other funeral directors, obviously, and that's been sort of one of the hidden industries in Gawler. It's enabled us to invest money into Gawler, i.e. the Adelaide Road premises, which we've done, and it's really been, it's been well supported by all the funeral directors, and that's I'm pleased to, very proud of that, because for your competitors to come and use you feel you've done something right. They must feel you've got the integrity to do it. So. We're now probably doing 2,300-400 cremations a year in Gawler, and a lot of that money is coming back into the town, through wages and things like that. So I said one of the hidden industries of the town. What's going on there? We're probably slightly bigger than Enfield as far as our cremation numbers, and not as big as Centennial Park. So. What happens there, and really what it is, what we can say now is we can look after everything in Gawler, from all our mortuary work, burial at the cemetery locally, or cremation in Gawler. Everything can happen in Gawler. Nobody needs to go to Adelaide or get taken away or anything. It can all happen here and happen here locally. So anyway, is there any questions? I'll be pleased to answer them.
The 45,000 you mentioned, in comparison, how many burials compared to 45,000 cremations in that period of time? Roughly.
Currently, the cremation rate in South Australia is is about 80% cremation. 80.
Yeah.
20% burial.
Jeez. Yeah. And that's gradually increased each year.
Increasing, that's it.
Sure is. Questions?
One question.
Yeah.
Is it true that originally flowers were put on the casket to hide a smell, rather than fancy dress?
I can't answer that question.
I've heard that many times. Apparently that's why they used to have, a bride used to carry flowers in the old days.
Yeah, because it could be, especially as I went back to that Burke and Hare situation where they weren't too well when they were taken to the cemetery, for the obvious reason of that. Yeah.
Mark, one thing that worries me after doing research into the cemetery, that you can document through burial register people, sort of from a previous era. What is people who are cremated, how are they recorded that people can research later?
Well, that depends entirely on the family where they place the ashes.
Yes.
And if they choose to put them in, much more common these days to put ashes in a family grave. So, you know, the headstone's inscribed, you wouldn't know if they're buried, cremated or what form took place. They're on the headstone, the remains are in the grave.
But there's no central register of
No.
cremations?
No,
So that's going to be a problem later on for people.
that's right.
Yeah, we're lucky this generation, but next generation will be having...
No, well, when people are on the banks of the Murray, they're in the national park, they're
Yep.
under the rose garden at the back of the house.
Yeah.
Because memorialisation is decreasing quite markedly.
Yeah.
David. David.
Yeah. I was just going to say, anyone who's interested, the old foundations of the crematorium is still there.
They are.
Turned it into a garden area, so you can still see the original site if you go there.
There's a couple of old cremation memorials there, aren't there, next to it?
I don't know, I just remember the foundations. were
Yeah, the
there.
foundations are still there.
Because of the old chain and pulley system that they used to terrify people because it's the rattling of chains, you know.
David was a funeral director for what, nearly 30 years?
34 years.
34 years. Right.
Just a quick one. On television the other day they had the show regarding disposal of bodies through the Living Science, and they were leaving bodies out in the, I'm not sure what it's still they show on TV.
Body farm.
That one.
Yeah.
They're testing sort of decomposition rates
That's
and
right,
things
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And their theory was that more people are going into that way rather than being cremated and buried. I'm not quite sure that would be right, but
Because it's free.
it was free.
No, it's really, you've got 12,000 deaths a year in South Australia, and that's less than 10% of the population. So I have a pretty big, that's purely experimental. Like at the moment, the deceased going to the university for anatomical purposes, they're very fussy who they take. You've got to be very healthy and a good specimen for them to take you. They're very discerning.
Mike Dennison.
And I was just going to say that the people who donate themselves to medical science are all cremated. So,
Eventually.
Eventually.
Yeah, that's only come in the last 5 or 6 years, hasn't it? Yeah.
Mike Dennison.
I've got two comments, and one of them's already been answered. It's about putting ashes into burial plots, so that's okay. Can we go back to the cutout in the newspaper, please? I want to bring something to your attention. You may not have...
What, that brownie coloured cutout?
Yeah.
Brownie colour.
1930s.
Yeah.
1930, that's right. That's grandfather Forgy cut that out and stuck it in the back of the book.
Right down the bottom, questions in Parliament.
You want to read it out?
Can you find it?
I saw that too.
Yeah, that particular one.
That's one then.
Right down the bottom, questions in Parliament. Did you pick the throwaway one-liner? It's a burning question.
Burning question.
That's the burning question, they said.
Yeah, something that that's the burning
It was
question.
very tongue-in-cheek.
It is a
It
burning
is a
question.
burning question.
You hadn't picked that?
No. Okay.
Sorry.
I might have heard that joke before somehow.
Have you? Up the back.
What is the cost between cremation and burial?
Well, the latest prices have come out, I can quote you that the Smithfield prices at the moment is you've got to reserve a plot, that's like rent the area of land and have the grave dug, is now $6,250. That's at Smithfield. Gawler's about 2/3 that. But it's very expensive, and cremation's about $1,500.
That's all up.
No, that's the fee to the payable to the authority. Sorry, I'll just clarify that point. The $6,250 is the money that's given to the Adelaide Cemeteries Authority. That's their fee for the grave. There's no casket, there's nothing with that, that's just for the cemetery plot.
How much do you charge, Brian?
1,320
Well,
up at St George's.
go local, folks.
Well, getting on to the cost, do you agree with that survey that was in the paper a few weeks back, claiming that there's something like 2,000 odd funeral parlours in Australia, and 85 in South Australia, and every one of them are charging way over the cost to get buried? I know you're going to say no.
Well, I think...
True, or?
Well, I think it's all those, you know, the costs that were quoted in that were the sort of the base costs of the cemetery. So there's nobody waiting for on call, you know, 20 like at all hours or what have you.
Did they ever interview you?
No, they didn't. We have a base cremation price of you know, like minimum service of $2,000, and people can build up to what they want for there. We offer people all what they require. So it's not a matter of some of these things used in the paper are the actual, say, list price of items.
Yes.
So if you were employed at a funeral home, that means you wouldn't get paid. As an employee, you wouldn't get paid because there's no money there for you to be paid. And I think they're a little bit cute sometimes when they write these prices up.
Yeah.
They're expecting, you know, forget the profit line. There's not even any money there to pay.
I just saw it as media trying to fill up a space in the paper.
Well, they love it. They love it. I mean, and I think most people realise that you have that. You know, there's got to be some reality here somewhere. And but reality doesn't sell papers.
No. Two questions. First, how many funeral parlours are owned by American companies? I believe there's quite a few.
Not anymore.
Are they?
No.
In South Australia.
No, not anymore. They all got sold out to a big group called InvoCare. Now, InvoCare conducts in Australia goodness me, about 60% of all funerals in Australia. They're like the Woolworths.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean they're cheaper, it just means they have a big market power. And they conduct like the Blackwells, the White Ladies, the Simplicities, all those brands. And interstate, they've got the Guardian brand. And they're all governed from Sydney. They're not like, and we're very fortunate. We're not like the corner grocer here, which can't compete with their buying power. We can. They haven't got that over us. Where Woolworths can always beat the corner store man with their buying power. We have the flexibility to make our own rules, and as a small company, and we can compete with them very easily because
we amount owned by this big company, is that?
Pardon?
There's still 60% owned by this
big company, InvoCare, which is a national company. Yeah.
And the second question, how long has it been that when you bury someone, now I think it's 25 years, that you lease the plot for? It used to be forever. Does that happen in every cemetery?
No. In Australia, it all varies amongst the states. In Victoria, New South Wales, there always were perpetual leases. South Australia was always set up as a tenure. Because the great problem with perpetual leases is that the cemeteries just go to rack and ruin. You go to New South Wales, you go out to Rookwood, and there's grass this high, monuments like that, and nobody's going to go anywhere near them. And what happens with the renewal, which they're doing in Centennial Park, 25 years is new, and you can have a 50-year lease, or you can renew them. But unless people are actually paying money as time goes on, there's no money there to maintain the cemetery. Like if somebody got buried at Centennial Park in the late 40s, they paid 2 guineas, which is what, $2.20. No, $4.20, sorry. And 50 years later, they're still trying to maintain the cemetery on this $4.20. Not going to happen. So that's why it's important to have renewal. It'll keep the venue, alive.
I know people at Salisbury Cemetery that have been buried there for many years, but nobody's ever come back to the family and said, hey, it's time to renew.
No, well, the other cemeteries are. And I've renewed plots at Williston for our family. Because I'm in the know, you see, so I'm a bad example of that, because I know. And a lot of people don't.
Salisbury Cemetery may be done?
No, probably not. They're sort of not. They're more a council than a cemetery authority.
Wayne.
Mark, you touched on the old days where things were a bit dodgy in terms of what you've got at the end of the day.
Yeah.
People ask me, does the whole coffin go in? It does, complete, because I've done it. And the other thing is that...
You mean for a cremation?
Yes, the whole coffin goes in. The whole lot.
Don't take the handles off and...
Oh, the metal parts. If there's metal parts, you take them off.
Yeah,
That knows all about it. And the other important part that Parliament Forgy have put in place is all the checks and balances to make sure there's no mistakes. So that when you turn up and get the ashes, that is from the coffin to the furnace, you've got it right. And it's all checked all the way through. And they put in a really good system, and I was part of that, and it is spot on. So you know that when you come and collect your ashes, they are yours, nobody else's.
They all the same, don't they?
Well, it's hard to tell.
You can only cremate one at a time.
Yeah.
Because so many people believe that they're mass cremated and then they're just divided up, and that's not the case. You can only cremate one person at a time.
Couple more questions? We could go on all night on this one. Last question then. I will answer one of the questions. Gawler, St George's has got a 50-year or a 99-year lease. Most people take a 99-year lease. But to answer your kind of question, our philosophy is that if you've got a memorial, proper memorial, then even at the end of the 99-year lease, if nothing is there to be maintained because it's a proper memorial, it goes on forever. We don't kind of have many releases because most of the headstones are fine. We've got a fund there that if we do get vandalism, we can afford to get the likes of Steve Garner in to fix it up. And we have a monthly working bee to keep the grounds neat and tidy. So that's what we do. But one thing we do is when there is, after 100 years, if there's someone's buried there but there's no, it's just dirt, then we advertise saying we're going to release that plot, given 2 years notice or whatever, and then someone else can go into that plot. But if they do, whoever goes into that plot, when they do the memorial for that person, they must do a memorial for the person 100 years ago as well.
And do
So
they dig those bones up,
so
right?
you've got continuity. So you're honouring who was there, even though they didn't have a memorial. You make a new one to go with it.
Brian, do you leave the bones there?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the most common thing they do at Centennial Park, Cheltenham, the older cemeteries is it's called a lift and deepen. They go down, they expose any remains there. They dig deeper and put the remains deeper in the grave. So you've got a new grave, but the old remains are not discarded. They're still in the same grave.
I heard down in West Terrace in the old days they'd float up one of the rain.
Oh yes, you had to. I hear your father saying now. He said you always had to wave at them so they'd turn the pumps on as you came through the gate at West Terrace to get the water out the grave.
One final, yes, you got the last question.
Yeah, quite a few of the cemeteries nowadays are going to a green lawned area and locating all the stones propped up against the wall. What's your opinion of that?
Well, that's an opinion. I mean, that's what they choose to do, Alan. There are several ones that some kids have been killed under headstones falling over, and I think we're living in the days of risk and litigation, and I think they've got to cover themselves to make it safe. And I think we'd be pretty brave to say not make something safe and something happens, because you've got a real problem. I know it's not as good as where it was, but it doesn't mark the spot, which it's supposed to mark the spot. But I think they're probably trying to work a compromise between litigation and practicality.
Thank you for your questions. I'll now ask Marion to give a vote of thanks. Thank you, Marion. Could you perhaps use the microphone if you wouldn't mind? Yeah. Got to click it on.
Mark, I'd like to thank you for coming here this evening. I'm sure everybody's found this topic most interesting. It's something we don't often talk about.
No, we should talk about it.
Yes, we should talk about it more. But we thank you very much. The history of it as well was very interesting. And I think your new premises, I haven't been inside, but I do commend you for putting the temperature and the forecast up on your sign. That's something definitely for the living.
Is that the temperature of the crematorium, or the normal temperature, or the crematorium temperature?
No, I think it's the normal temperature. Actually, I only noticed it tonight for the first time, so it came in very handy. And we'd like to accept you to accept this on behalf of the group. And thank you, Mark, for that.
Actually, we just talked about the sign. That was a bit of a whim by myself, and I thought, well, we're doing everything new. Should we try one of these new digital signs? And then I thought, what can we do with that? I thought we could put the weather up, you see. Because you hook it up to your computer and it'll just keep producing it on the sign. I've got Claire, my daughter, working on that, not me, because the younger people do much better than I do. But that's innovation. You try and make things, make things better and not quite so staid. I try and make the whole place a bit more warm and friendly. So thank you very much.